of a global economic downturn. So now, to start this session, it's an honor to welcome our esteemed Minister of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia, Ibu Sri Mulyani.
Thank you very much. Very good morning to all of you, Pak Dirut, Bank Mandiri, Pak Darmawan, Pak Komut, Pak Kate Basri, dan all my esteemed colleagues from Parliament, Pak Andreas, Pak Eriko, dan Ibu Putri. Ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to greet you with a Happy New Year. Although this is already the second month of 2023, but it's the first day of second month. So I think it's still very relevant to say Happy New Year to all of you. I do hope that 2023 will bring a much better situation for all of us. I'm going to share with you, as asked by the event organizer or the organizer of this event, how the fiscal consolidation actually serve not only the health of the fiscal instrument, but also continue supporting the recovery of our economy. First, of course, on the global situation, because I'm fully aware that Bapak Presiden is already opening this morning, as well as the geopolitics, so I don't have to convey too much on this area. But basically, the shifting of the risk, which is coming from the global environment, from the pandemic-related risk to the unsmooth and challenging recovery process due to the disruption on the supply side, mainly the maybe not synchronized recovery of the demand side and the supply side originally, and then add to that situation with the global politics and the disruption because of the war in Ukraine, which is then creating a spillover in terms of the food and energy prices, pressuring the inflation, especially from the advanced country, and that created global inflation, and the response from the policy, especially on the monetary side. So these are all the maybe short summary of what we are facing today. And that's become the theme of many international organizations like the IMF, OECD, World Bank, in first reading what is the global environment challenges and also the outlook for the economy in 2022 and 2023. Some of the economy is now publishing the last quarter 2022, which may be slightly better than what is originally projected. Slightly meaning it's supposed to be contraction, but happen to be 0%. That's better. Or it's supposed to be 0%, now it's 0.25%. But what we are talking about is actually the performance of the economy confirm that the weakening of the global economy is there. Maybe as not as deep, as not as severe, but it's there. And will continue in the first quarter 2023, or maybe longer to the first half of 2023. But this kind of maybe tilting a little bit better, providing more optimism in the sense that the pressure coming from the policy response, that is the monetary tightening and increasing interest rate by the monetary authority, will be at least abate, or in this case slowing down, and that provide a new hope that 2023, at least on the second half, we are going to see a combination which is much positive, that is declining inflation or stable price and tend to decline in terms of pressure of price, and strengthening the recovery. So growth is going to recover while the pressure on the price is going to be eased. That is something which is very good in the sense that the policy dilemma for many policymakers is going to be much, much less difficult. The most difficult is when we have to choose between stabilizing price, including exchange rate, vis-a-vis maintaining the growth. If we have to choose between two, we usually say, no, we want to have both. Just like if you ask to choose between your mom or your dad, you are not going to choose. We want both. That is the situation that is now a little bit easing, and that's providing a much more upbeat. This situation hopefully is going to be maintained, although unavoidably, if you look at many of the projections by many international institutions showing that 2022 is already past, but it's going to be much, much weaker than 2021, and will continue in 2023, in which the weakening growth is going to be much lower than 2022. So with that kind of environment, what kind of fiscal policy that we have to design? First, in Indonesia, in the past 3 years, 2020 to 2022, we designed the fiscal policy as the effective and the most important instrument to deal with the challenge coming from the pandemic, the social implication of the pandemic, and how we are going to support the recovery of the economy. So there are multi-objectives of the fiscal tools. And within that context, we fully aware that within this very important extraordinary period of time, the fiscal is going to suffer from what we call it unsustainable path, because we are widening the deficit in an unprecedented way, much larger than what is actually allowed by our law, fiscal prudent policy. That is more than 3% of GDP. And that's have the consequence in terms of the debt to GDP ratio, which is going to increase. 2020, in which that is the most difficult extraordinary situation, we widen the deficit from originally is only 1.79%, which is actually a very small and almost balanced on the primary balance, then widened into 5.1 to 6.3, and turned out to be the result is 6.1%. That is because the revenue dropped by 16%, the spending increased by 12%. Because of the contraction of the economy, because of the first pandemic year in which most of the respondents is just locking down and preventing people to do their activity. The counter-cyclical was designed in a way that it is supposed to be responsive, flexible, but also targeted and effective. Based on our design of the fiscal policy, which is based on the law number 2, 2020, this is the emergency law passed by our parliament, which is also have a very harmonious or at least synchronized thinking. The response of the parliamentary in Indonesia with the executive branch in responding to this extraordinary challenge is actually remarkable. And I have to thank my colleague here, Pak Andreas, Pak Eriko, and Bu Putri. I'm blessed with the parliament, which is actually have the same reading of the threat and the same urgency to act. I'm saying this in English because I know some democratic system not having those kind of luxury in terms of the relationship. I don't have to mention any country name, right? But you've already have the previous session, which I think discussing about that, although I didn't attend that session, but I think that is one of additional risk, not only for the country, but also for the world economy. So Indonesia responding very agile, fast, and effectively. And that's why when the second year of the pandemic, 2021, we thought that we should also still design the fiscal policy as supportive as possible. And we designed with a budget deficit of 5.5. That is still above 3%, which is allowed to the normal situation fiscal prudent policy. Happen to be the outturn is the deficit is much less, that is 4.6%. This is a combination of the right response of the economy. The fiscal policy is still supportive, the recovery is happening, the global environment which is also starting to recover, especially in the advanced country, United States and Europe is among the two fastest recovered economy from the pandemic 2020, and that's also creating a demand-driven and also at the same time some commodity increase. That combination provides us with some boom of the recovery on the revenue side, while on the spending side, we make sure that our budget support the handling of the COVID, protecting the social, especially the bottom 40%, and supporting the recovery from small, medium enterprises to the corporation. That is the three-pronged approach of our fiscal policy. And that's worked very well. 2021, spending, focusing on this, protecting the people, handling the COVID, and supporting the recovery of the corporate sector from small, medium size to the corporate level. And that's why the realization of the deficit is much less, because the recovery on the revenue, it's much faster, but the spending is relatively stable and disciplined as well as focused. As you all know, the performance of the economy until the third quarter is very remarkably strong for 2022. When we also design the fiscal tools, is still very much supporting. The design was actually have a deficit of 4.9%, but the realization or the actual deficit is only 2.4%. When we design the fiscal response and at the same time also fiscal consolidation path, at that time many of bondholder, rating agency asking us as a finance ministry, saying, how do you know that this COVID is going to be 3 years in which you are going to be able to recover your deficit below 3%? And I asked them, do I know something that you don't know? We don't know about this pandemic, but we are very confident that these 3 years will be adequate to provide both the handling of the COVID, recovery of the economy, and then also the recovery of the health of our fiscal tool. And it turned out 2022, we reached the deficit below 3% already. At that time, many actually quite skeptical that the deficit could reach below 3% within 3 years, which is the design of 2023, designing our deficit in 2.8%. So that's the story of the fiscal consolidation. So I've already addressed the first topic that you are asking me to do. The end, happy ending. I will provide you with additional. First, the recovery, the quality of the recovery of the Indonesia economy. It is actually broad-based, across sectoral and across regional. All region now enjoying a positive growth. This is including the region which is hard hit by the pandemic, for example, like Bali, because of the tourism sector, and other area. Sumatra especially, which is also quite volatile. All sector has been recovered, as you also see from this, from the hard hit by the pandemic and then recover. Transportation, which is hard hit by the pandemic, Hotel and restaurant also the hardest hit, the contraction on the transportation up to 15%. Hotel and restaurant, the contraction due to the pandemic in 2020 is minus 10.3%. Now they recover with a double digit. So this is relatively broad-based, across sectoral, across regional, which is good from the growth point of view. From the quality of growth, the growth are able to create employment so that the unemployment level also decline. After increase by at the level of 7%, now the unemployment rate is below 6%, that is 5.86. The growth also providing more chance for us to continue declining the poverty after we suffer from increasing poverty rate at the 10.19, now is already below 10%, back to the single digit. And President Jokowi now emphasizing eradicating of the extreme poverty, stunting, as well as stabilizing price to the inflation reduction. We don't have Inflation Reduction Act like in the United States, but we have inflation reduction concerted effort. And actually for Indonesia, it works better because we don't have to spend a lot of money, like trillion of dollars, but the price is actually stabilized because of the work between all the level of government, president, governor, mayor, city, and bupati, as well as across sectoral. So this may be a showcase for the world regarding how to stabilize the price without using too much fiscal tools as well as monetary tools. Because the source of the inflation is actually from the supply side. With that, Indonesia enjoying what we call it recovery with relatively stability. Inflation has been actually stabilized, and Indonesia continue maintaining and monitoring very closely all the level, the aspect of the inflation, very, very detailed. Minister of Home Affairs, their business is now every week monitoring inflation all in the region, which is amazing. We also enjoy the external balance, which is very strong, and I think this is already being mentioned. Trade account is now reaching the surplus record in a history. Current account balance is still positive until the end of 2022 and will continue maintain in 2023. So with that, I think we are all agreed that 2023, this momentum of recovery for the economy will be continue amid the uncertainty, and of course the fiscal policy will continue serve as the most important policy for supporting the recovery process. Our consolidation is actually very, very credible and is already being delivered. As I mentioned, the budget 2022 is already below 3% of deficit, and we are going to continue maintain fiscal support in a selective, flexible, and targeted way. The recovery of the fiscal health is actually on all fronts. From the revenue side, that is the tax collection, the tax ratio is also recovered after hit hard by the pandemic, in which the tax ratio is 8.32% and now to 10.4%. The primary balance is also very close to balance. The decline of this deficit on the primary balance is actually the indicator that we are consolidating and creating a budget which is healthier after hit hard by the pandemic. And of course, the fiscal risk is now relatively manageable amid the situation of the trend of the cost of money, which is increased because of the global inflation and increasing interest rate by monetary policy. 2023 budget will continue building a stronger foundation for our economy. First, we are going to make sure that the spending and the whole fiscal is going to support the quality of growth. The quality of growth will be measured by first the human quality index, and that's why spending on education, health, as well as social protection is going to be still among the largest. For the first time in a history that our education spending is going to reach above 600 trillion rupiah. That is 612 trillion rupiah. When I first appointed as a finance minister back in 2005-2006, the total budget of Indonesia is no more than 550 trillion. That is the total budget. Today, the total education spending is going to be larger than 600 trillion. Just to give you the sense of the magnitude and the allocation which we continue dedicate for improving of the human capital. And this is not only government, central government spending, but local government spending directly to improve the quality of the school management up to the teaching, and also providing support in a much more flexible and innovative way. We already accumulated what we call it the endowment fund for education, which is now reaching more than 129 trillion rupiah. It is a money that can provide a support for any education, research, and the need for all the sectoral to improve the quality of human index. So this is one of the most important ones. Second one is, of course, health spending. Due to the COVID is now already relatively manageable, so we focus on the non-COVID related health spending. Stunting is very important, but also other health issue, prevention as well as curative are equally important. On the prevention, meaning that we have to strengthen the health system up to the primary health services, Puskesmas and Posyandu, which is then linked to the, again, a stunting on the children below 5 years, or even the baby which is carried by the mother, which is also very important. We also still continue dedicate quite strong allocation for the social protection. This is especially related to the uncertainty on the price of food and energy, and also continue strengthening the social spending, both for cash transfer for the most needed, as well as for the health insurance, especially for more than 94 million poor people in Indonesia. In 2023, we will continue to finish many of the national priority projects to the infrastructure spending of 392 trillion. This is not only just spending to complete or to finish many of the projects, but we work with Minister of State-owned Enterprise, making sure that the SOEs in Indonesia is not becoming a victim of this infrastructure development. So we work closely to make sure that SOEs, especially those who receive the mandate or the task to build, they also have to clean up their balance sheet. Some of what we call it construction companies, PLN, energy companies, Pertamina, these are all the area which we want to make sure that they should become a healthy and good governance state-owned enterprises, including, of course, the banking sector, Mandiri, which is, I think, in this couple of months, I'm going to enjoy many of the publication of their profit, which is published this week. If I drink, then I have another hour to speak. And of course, we are going to also continue strengthening the institution, both at the national as well as the local level. And because of the geopolitical situation, we are going to also making sure the allocation for the national defense and the improvement of the security in Indonesia. But this is not about how much money you are going to spend. The most important is the quality of spending. And that is exactly what is the area that we are going to continue making sure that the spending improvement, spending better, is become one of the area of the reform. We've already reforming the law which is related to the government transfer to the local government. We are also making sure that ministries as well as the local government is going to be more performance-based spending, which is, I think, is going to be also improving the accountability and transparency of how the budget is being managed. We are also making sure that the reform on the revenue area is going to be there. So we've already passed, again, thank you to the Parliament, that we've already now reforming many of the legislation, outdated as well as not yet finished. The Omnibus Law, which is related to the tax, harmonious tax law, is already being passed. We have updated the law which is governing how the government transfer to the local government. There are quite complicated and different transfer to the local government. We also already passed with the Parliament the law which is related to this financial sector reform. These are all the area which is very, very important to build a stronger foundation for the Indonesia economy. So when the economy recover, fiscal becoming recover as well as consolidated, better quality of spending, reform on the revenue side, and the financial sector reform, which is, I think, is very, very important in order for us to be able to make sure that we are going to continue support the economic growth and the development of Indonesia. Financial sector reform is very critical because Indonesia, among the ASEAN countries, is still the shallowest financial sector, so deepening of the financial sector is very important. We are going to be able to continue promoting long-term financing, which is very important to have a much more credible and reliable financial institution, including insurance and pension. We also have to improve the competitiveness and the efficiency of the financial sector, so regulatory becoming very important, updated with combination of the technology, the very vast product, and how the regulation that will fit well with this kind of dynamic of the market as well as the market player. Indonesia also needs to make sure that we are able to respond to the global threat that is climate change through the financial sector regulation instrument as well as design of policy. Carbon tax is already mentioned or is already approved by the Parliament in our tax reform. Carbon market now is being introduced. We are also in this financial sector reform, the carbon market, especially how it should perform as an additional instrument in addressing climate change, is going to be one of the area which is going to growing very fast. So Ministry of Finance, Central Bank, OJK, working very closely, making sure that Indonesia is going to be able to prepare the right foundation, market-based mechanism to support many of the climate change agenda, including financing side. So these are all the story of the fiscal, the recovery, but most importantly, this is the story of Indonesia, who has showing a very resilient and have the ability to withstand the most dramatic shock to the global economy, like the pandemic, geopolitics, and at the same time, not only defensive in resisting or managing the shock, but Indonesia continue building a stronger foundation, both on the institution, legislation, as well as the tool and the instrument that we are having. Fiscal policy, fiscal tools is the most important instrument in managing Indonesia, facing with so many uncertainty, has been able to perform their responsibility relatively well, and we are now in a credible path to become also healthier, so that we are going to be able to be ready with any shock that could always hit any country or economy in the near future. Thank you so much, and I do hope this will provide you with confidence, right? Because this is supposed to be investment forum. So I do hope this is not just talk and listening to the presentation from President to the Minister of Finance, but you decide to start investing in Indonesia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bu Sri Mulyani. Please kindly remain on stage as we will continue your session with a dialogue with our moderator, Kania Sutisna Winata.
Very well. Hello and welcome, everyone. I hope everyone is keeping safe, healthy, and prosperous as we welcome a new year. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Kania Sutisna Winata, and it is an honor also for me to be in the company of, I think, one of the most brilliant ministers Indonesia has ever had, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Finance Minister of the Republic of Indonesia, Women Finance Minister of the Republic of Indonesia. Welcome, Bu Ani. It's always a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
And thank you also for taking time to address us in this next dialogue that we will have. I will try to address all relevant issues at hand with the time allotted for our discussion, because we will not be opening any Q&A from the audience. So just a heads up. As was perhaps mentioned and also highlighted in all previous keynote speeches, including yours, Ibu Ani, I think it is safe to assume that Indonesia has had a pretty successful year. Last year, not only did Indonesia had successfully managed to handle and contain the spread of COVID-19, all mobility restrictions in Indonesia have been lifted. And, but despite COVID-19, Indonesia's economy had also managed to grow at a projected 5.2 to 5.3% last year, with a lower than 3% fiscal deficit, which is a fiscal consolidation 1 year earlier than scheduled. So all looking good, yet we are facing the prospect of a global economic slowdown this year. So one might still wonder, can Indonesia really withstand these external pressures? And I know, Bu Ani, you've already laid out in your keynote speech all the strategies that the government will be implementing, at least on the fiscal side, but in the next 10 or 15 minutes or so, Ibu Ani, we would like to dig deeper on the sustainability aspect, the long-term plan in supporting economic transformation for an economic that is sustainable, and an economic growth that is more sustainable in the long term. We know that Indonesia had recently developed an appetite for a greener economy, so we would like to talk we would like to talk a little bit more on that. So. Last but not least, perhaps, as was already mentioned, maybe we can also talk a little bit more on the new finance law, the Financial Sector Development and Strengthening Law, or PPSK law, which has just recently passed, and perhaps is causing quite a stir, but maybe you can explain a little bit more on that. So Bu Ani, again, welcome. Thank you so much. How are you?
Thank you, Kanya. So you've already asking a lot of questions, so I try to sort out. First,
no, I think
how Indonesia is going to survive the global economic slowdown. Second, on the green financing. The third one, how are you? I'm good. I'm fine, thank you.
That's very, very, very
good.
That is
the
easiest. Yeah, I know you already covered everything in your presentation.
Okay.
But I've had the pleasure of speaking with you on numerous occasions. I think the last time I spoke to you was in the end of last year, Ibu Ani. I'm just wondering, has anything changed at all since then? Are there any new concerns that is keeping you awake at night, perhaps?
Well, first, from the economic point of view, and especially, of course, as a finance minister, your responsibility is to manage the budget. From the economic point of view, 2022 has turned out to be stronger than expected, and especially in terms of our budget consolidation, this is also faster and stronger than expected. Some is actually as a result of the strong recovery, as well as the reform on the taxation. As I mentioned that we've already passed the harmonized tax law with the parliament, and that is also contain many of very important reform. Not only the VAT, which is increased from 10 to 11, but also we have the voluntary disclosure taxation, which is providing us with also quite a significant additional. But also from the economic recovery, as I mentioned earlier, across region, across sectoral, which also providing a quite strong support for the recovery of our budget. On the spending side, you're asking me, of course, this is a quality that still need to be improved, but we are going to continue support many of the ministries as well as local government in order for them to be able to spend better and also more transparent to the public, so that the public have the confidence regarding how the budget is being used. On the economic recovery itself, I think domestically we have a very good President Jokowi, I'm sure this morning also talking about the recovery, but most importantly is also, it is not just recovery in terms of the headline growth. We are talking about building the foundation stronger and better for Indonesia. That's why the talking about the quality of growth is the equality is very important. The Gini coefficient is already improved. We have to make sure that the bottom 40% and especially the bottom 20% is not going to be lagged behind from this recovery process and the improvement of their welfare. But also President Jokowi is emphasizing that we should look at the economy and making sure that we are going to be able to create more value added on the process. This is actually translated into, which is actually one of the very important challenge on the Indonesia economy. In the past 30 years, many economists, including Pak Khatib Basri, is always saying that there is a deindustrialization process. Manufacturing sector in Indonesia contribution is already declined. Agriculture relatively stagnant. Services sector increased, but this is not a high quality services sector. So that's not really a good quality of growth for Indonesia. President Jokowi outlined the strategy. We have rich natural resource, but we continue exporting as a raw material. Improving the investment so that there will be more value added. It is not just asking, hey, you have to invest here because now I'm not allow you to export the raw material. That won't work. It will work if we also do our homework, that is improving the investment climate. So for them to be able to invest because they know that there is a certainty in Indonesia, there is a simplification on regulation, there is infrastructure in place, there is an easy to do business in Indonesia. And that is the area which the President is not asking that you should build smelter in Indonesia, full stop, no negotiation. That's not the way we do it. We know that we have the ability to create more value added when the investor have the confidence, and that's why we are now preparing many of the reform of doing business in Indonesia. That's contribute to the balance of payment, that's contribute to the, what you call it, value added in the economy. But it will only be sustained if, again, infrastructure, bureaucracy, regulation, as well as at the same time our human capital, which is also need to be prepared.
Very well. I think we have like 1.5 minutes left, and I'd like to, I'm sure you can wrap it up in 1.5 minutes, Mulyani, but I'd like for you to elaborate a little bit more on the plan of a carbon tax. I know it has been postponed until 2025, but what are our views, what is your view on that? Do you think, what do you think will be the impact of Indonesia's carbon tax on economic growth, and at the same time, will it increase tax revenue?
Well, maybe the emphasis is not on the revenue side. We should look at this instrument to address the issue of climate change. So we are all recognized that the climate change is too much emission, CO emission in the world. So how you are going to make sure that the country is going to continue growing, but the CO2 emission is going to decline? That is actually something which is the most challenging part. This is especially true because when you are growing higher, you are going to require more energy and all, which is continue producing CO2. So one of the most important for Indonesia is how you are going to transform the economic path into a greener growth. And for us to be able to create that kind of environment, instrument which is required is the market. So you use the market. If carbon, CO2 has no value, no one will care regarding whether I'm going to emit or not to emit. Why do I have care? Why do I have to be care of this CO2 when there is no value? So market mechanism is one necessary condition for everybody to recognize that this is global public bad. And that's why there is a value of polluting. Polluter pay principle need to be introduced. But how you are going to introduce? That's why Indonesia introducing the carbon market. And if you are trading computer or clothes, you are trading something which is tangible and easy to quantify, and then people can see, okay, I'm going to pay this iPad and so on. If you trade CO2, no one can see it. Where is the CO2? Why should I pay? How do you prove that you actually reducing the CO2? And that's why the institutional setting need to be empowered and built in Indonesia. Carbon market is not just, okay, we are going to open this market, anything, anyone want to supply, anyone to demand, they are going to meet in this market. It's not going to be as simple as that.
Okay.
And that's why a lot of introduction needed. A lot of now carbon discussion, carbon market discussion with Menko Luhut, Pak Erlangga Menko Perekonomian, Minister Ibu Siti, Minister of Energy, ourselves as the Minister of Finance, Minister of Trade, because in the past, whether this is considered as a commodity or this is considered as a security, that is paper that can be trading. And in this Undang-Undang P2SK that is harmonizing financial sector, we decided that this is going to be, the trading is going to be in the OJK capital market purview. But what is going to be traded is a paper. The paper which is showing that this is the value of the CO2. Just like you are trading a stock, you are buying and selling a bonds, but what you are actually buying and selling is the quality of the company behind those stocks. This is also the same. So that's why we are now preparing for how you are going to measure the carbon, what level of price that need to be introduced so that it is not going to disrupt the recovery of the momentum.
Okay.
And also we look at the regional and global practice.
Okay.
The price of carbon, you asking carbon, we can have another 1 hour for that. We have 1.5
I think in
minutes.
conclusion, it's going to take time.
No, it's not only just that, it's the simple a lot of work that is being done at the technical level, but I'm going to also provide many of you here, the player, you better prepare to understand this.
Okay.
Because the future of your company is going to be affected by global regulation, global practice, national regulation, national practice, which will count the CO2 in your country as well as globally. So understand ESG is very important. I didn't mention about this, but I'm sure that many of you know environmental, social, and governance in the conduct of your company, and especially in the conduct of the financial institution like Bank Mandiri and others. That is going to be very important.
Very well. Ladies and gentlemen, the Finance Minister of the Republic of Indonesia, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Ibu Sri Mulyani and Kania Sutisna Winata. Please remain on stage for a photo op. And I would like to invite President Director of Bank Mandiri, Bapak Darmawan Junaidi, and Bapak Panji Irawan to come on stage to join Ibu Sri Mulyani and Kania Sutisna Winata for a photo op. Thank you. Okay, allow me to count 3, 2, 1. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Okay, one more. 3, 2, and 1. Again, please give another big round of applause for the Minister of Finance of Republic of Indonesia.